Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have an 8-game Major League Baseball slate that starts at 7 o'clock. Before I get started, can you guys smack that like and subscribe button? Also, share the video, really helps the channel a lot. Really do appreciate it. Make sure to check out Discord and YouTube memberships in the description below. With that said, let's go ahead and get into it today. So we're going to start with Rodriguez for Detroit, and if you remove his first 3 starts of the year, he's had just 2 bad games all season since then. And while he is in an easy matchup and has had an easy schedule, his K rate has been decent. He's a decent play today as a result of a good matchup and really not too much to have to worry about in Kansas City's lineup today. Then we'll look at Luis Castillo for Seattle. He is facing Minnesota. He does strike out a lot. He does need some strikeouts to pay off, obviously, here. But he does have some upside in a plus matchup. That said, it is a little bit risky as Minnesota does have some good bats in their lineup, and I do have some upside to some of them on this particular slate. Then we'll look at Charlie Morton for Atlanta. Now, Braves pitching has had a rough week, but he's a stabilizing force here as he's been pitching well. He has 5 straight starts with a win, and he's had at least 18 fantasy points in that stretch. I really like his upside today, and while Arizona is a good hitting team, he definitely has some good utility against some potential today, especially on a slate that's somewhat weak at pitcher. Verlander for the Mets is also in play. He has a low floor and high ceiling. He hasn't been very consistent this season, but when he's on, he's done really well. His K rate just hasn't been all that great, but when he does have good games, he is capable of high-scoring games, so he's definitely viable today. He's also in a pretty decent price range for his potential on this slate, especially in a good matchup like this. Then we'll look at Berrios for Toronto. Now, I do like some of the bats on San Diego today, and his floor is a little bit low, but he can limit the earned runs. He can pay off as a good contrarian play today, and he's also cheap enough that he's viable on the slate. And then we'll look at Medea for Minnesota against Seattle. He is a Hail Mary option. In his 8 starts, he's had 3 over 25 fantasy points. The rest have been under 11. The crux here is he's in a situation where 28 fantasy points is possible, which he's done twice, though he is very risky today. So he is viable, though. I don't really see too much weather issues today, though we do have a lot of stackable teams. Atlanta, Chicago Cubs, Cincinnati, San Francisco, the Mets, Yankees all have really good upside in the slate. Moving into the catchers, we're going to start with Sean Murphy. Now, he's had 5 home runs the last 10 games. He's also had a few good games in that stretch as well. He's very expensive, but he's a good option at catcher. If he was to take the game off, which he sometimes does take a day off occasionally, he could potentially you could put in Travis d'Arnaud at this position as well. But we're also going to look at Blake Sabal for San Francisco. Sorry about that. He can play catcher or outfield today. He's been a little bit more or bust lately, but he is in Cincinnati, and he's got good home run upside here. He's also averaged 7 fantasy points a game over the last 10, so he definitely has some utility here. Then we'll look at Keibert Ruiz for Washington. He's had 4 games over 10 fantasy points the last 5. And that includes 2 home runs. He's also been inconsistent, but his home run metrics are very solid for this matchup. And he does have some upside here, averaging over 8 fantasy points a game over the last 10. And then Alvarez for the Mets. He's got a really good matchup here against Toussaint and Chicago White Sox. Excuse me. Yeah, it's hard to argue with the 2 home runs he hit yesterday, and he faces another good situation. He's been smashing home runs recently with 7 in the last 11 games. He's also been batting .371 in that stretch, so he's about as hot as anybody on this slate. I really like his upside here. Moving into the first base, we're going to start with Matt Olson. Now, Matt Olson has been hitting as good as anybody on this slate over the last month or so, and he has 30 home runs on the season. He's got really good upside here, and he's actually kind of due for a home run. His big issue here is his price, because he does hit the ball well. He's hitting nearly 300 for the last 10 games, and he has a nice upside as a result, but his price makes him somewhat hard to roster today. Wilmer Flores for San Francisco can also play first or third base. In 2 games in Cincinnati this week, he's had 3 home runs, excuse me. And I don't know, I say earned runs, home runs. He's been batting very well lately, and he's dirt cheap. He gives you a lot of upside, and he's got some good potential here as he's averaging a ridiculous 10 fantasy points a game over the last 10, and he's got a 500 batting average in that stretch. Then we'll look at Torkelson for Detroit, who hit 2 home runs yesterday. He's averaging 10 fantasy points a game over the last 10 as well. He's also hit some home runs recently, which give him some upside. And though he does strike out some, he's still hitting 300 nearly over the last 10 games. You can also consider Vlad Jr. and Christian Walker at this position. Maybe in second base, we'll look at Ozzie Albies for Atlanta. He has hit the ball pretty well throughout the season. He's also hitting 324 right now, and he's had 2 home runs the last 10 games. He actually hasn't hit a home run, and I think the last one was 8 games ago, so he does have some upside here for that. He's been scoring fantasy points very well, though, throughout the season, and he's got really nice upside in this matchup. Oswald Perez is in play today for the Yankees. Now, he draws some good upside here, as he's had some good games recently. But he does need to draw the start to pay off. He's been somewhat inconsistent throughout the season, and he doesn't have a home run. But he does have some good hitting metrics. In the 3 games since he's been back from AAA, he's scored 10 fantasy points in 2 of them. So he draws some interesting upside on the slate, though he is somewhat high risk, high reward. But if he draws the start at the front of the lineup, then that gives him some utility. Chris Morel didn't play yesterday, even though he was set to play. I'm a little concerned about his injury, but if he does play today, he'll be in play, as he has good matchup metrics and has some home run potential in this one. You could also consider Jonathan India, Nico Horner, and Gabby Torres at this position. Moving to third base, we're going to look at Austin Riley, and I feel like I'm a broken clock looking at these Atlanta guys, but they're all hitting the ball extremely well lately. He scored a ridiculous 45 fantasy points yesterday as well with 2 home runs. Now he is a little bit cheaper than some of the other options at Atlanta, which gives him some utility here, but he does have more risk as a result that he's not as consistent as a hitter as some of the other guys, but he's definitely viable on the slate. Ella De La Cruz for Cincinnati is also in play. Now, he hasn't had a great stretch the last about 6 games, but he is due for a big one, and he's in a great situation to do it here, so I do think he's viable today. J.D. Davis is also in play for San Francisco. Now, he is pretty inexpensive here. Now, he's been somewhat inconsistent lately. His batting average has been really bad, but he does draw some home run metrics in this matchup, and this is a great situation for him to break out, though he is high risk, high reward. Christian Encarnacion is a core play for me. He has hit the ball really well yesterday in his first game as a pinch hitter. He hit a home run and had a 3-run homer. In fact, he also got another hit, so I think he has really good upside in this matchup. He's also dirt cheap and helps you pay up at other positions. You can also consider Wilmer Flores, Oswaldo Pereza, and Chris Morel, and Manny Machado at this position. Maybe a shortstop, we're going to look at Bobby Witt Jr. Now, he is high risk, high reward in this situation, as I do like the pitcher he's going against. But his 2 games against Detroit, he haven't been very well either so far, even though they had really good metrics. He hasn't struck out, though. He's making contact. It's just he hasn't hit anything out of the park. And he is somewhat a good hitter, so he's also hit the ball very well recently, averaging over 10 fantasy points a game. So as long as he can continue to hit the ball decently well, he's definitely going to be a guy to consider, though he's a little bit pricey on this particular slate. Javier Baez is also in play for Detroit. Now, he's hit the ball inconsistent throughout the year, but he's had some good games, and yesterday he had a really good game with some stolen bases. He is capable of that game in and game out. He's also, the metrics also suggest that he could have a really solid game today. I do like his upside in this matchup. And then we're going to look at C.J. Abrams for Washington. Now, he's had 8 games in the last 9 over 10 fantasy points. Now, he has hit the ball really well in that stretch at 350 batting average, but he also has 8 stolen bases. He's really picking up the stolen base potential, so I really like his upside. He's hitting the ball well enough to be viable, too. He's also just managing to get on base, and he's not striking out a ton. He's only got 7 strikeouts in the last 10 games, so he definitely has some utility, and even if he can get on base and steal a couple bases, that will pay off here at this position. Maybe the outfielders, we're going to start with Acuna, who is our core play. He's just strong with Acuna. He's hitting the ball extremely well. He's hitting 317 and stolen base potential, get on base every game, scoring fantasy points in lots of different ways, and he has massive home run potential in this one, so I really like his upside. Juan Soto and Fernando Tatis Jr. and Also, Jake Fraley are all available over $5,000 and have some utility. Some and they all look like they're really solid situations. Though I do think San Diego's a little bit risky today. I still think they're pretty viable. But as for some value plays at this position, we'll look at Jock Peterson first. Jock Peterson has had a decent game yesterday, and he's been getting fantasy points on the board. He just hasn't been getting any big games lately. The metrics, though, do look solid. Though his batting average has been rough, he has some potential here as a good contrarian option. Then we'll look at Conforto also for San Francisco. He does draw some interesting metrics here. He's hitting the ball decently well with 8.2 fantasy points per game over the last 10. He's also been over 12 fantasy points in 7 of those games. In the last 4 of the last 7 games, he's been over 12 fantasy points. And he draws good metrics here, and he's managed to have good hitting games in that stretch. He just needs to have a bigger game to pay off here. Michael Harris is also in play for Atlanta. Now, he hasn't hit the home runs that we kind of expected, but he's really improved his hitting from the start of the season. He has also got stolen base potential. If he can get on base, he's going to make some things happen, and Atlanta is playing just as well as anybody, and he's also a lot cheaper than most of the other bats on Atlanta. Then we'll look at Brandon Nimmo for Mets. Now, he has been somewhat inconsistent from the hitting perspective lately. He's been relying on home runs, surprisingly, to pay off fantasy-wise. But he is capable of having good games, and he seems like maybe he's starting to get out of the slump again, as he's had some good hit games recently. So it's just a matter of time before he gets going again, and he's in a good situation here to get out of that slump. Ian Happ for the Cubs is also in play. He's had 3 games over 10 fantasy points the last 4. He seems to be hitting better recently, which gives him some upside and some confidence, but he's still been high risk, high reward throughout the season, as he really hasn't had the season we expected. Then we'll look at Zuna for Atlanta. Now, he's been in a really bad slump, but he's a very streaky player. He goes through stretches where he just doesn't do anything. This is a great situation for him, though, as he has some really good upside. If he draws a start today, he may take a day off, though, so do keep that in mind. Then I have some sub $3,000 players. I'm just going to run through them real quick. Mike Yastrzemski for San Francisco. He can play in the outfield. Oswaldo Perez for the Yankees can play second or third base. He's $3,000. Christian Encarnacion for Cincinnati is only $2,500 and can play third base. Dan Vogelbach is only $2,100 for the Mets. He can play first base. Darian Blanco for Kansas City is $2,300. He can play in the outfield. Forrest Wall could get his first career start here for Atlanta. If he does, he's minimum price at $2,000 and he can play in the outfield. Mike Tauchman for the Cubs is $2,800 and in the outfield. Tucker Barnhart at $2,200 for the Cubs. Looks like an interesting catcher. Trent Grisham for San Diego at $2,300 is also a good outfielder. So overall, I do think the slate is viable. I do think it's going to be high scoring again. Pitching is going to be rough, but overall, I think it's a good slate, and it should be a good scoring slate again. So we should see a lot of earned runs, a lot of runs in general scored. So hopefully a bunch of home runs as well. Thank you guys for liking, commenting, and subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.